They called the police. It didn't help. These three true stories prove some nightmares can't be stopped. This took place in the autumn of 2021, while I was living alone in a rented townhouse in southern Illinois. It was the first time I had ever lived on my own. And even though I was technically a grown adult, 27 years old with a steady job and a consistent routine, the idea still made me anxious. I had just come out of a difficult breakup and thought that a bit of peace and isolation might help me heal. The townhouse was one of several identical ones in a row, simple but clean and peaceful, tucked away in a quiet cul-de-sac just off a rural highway. The area had that classic suburban feel: beige siding, tidy bushes, wind chimes, and family names printed on mailboxes. Most residents were older, though a few young families lived nearby. I didn't know any of them personally, which suited me just fine. I preferred to keep my distance. But from the very beginning, there was one neighbor who didn't quite fit in. He lived 3 units down, a large man in his mid-40s with a scruffy beard and an odd habit of standing outside at night. Sometimes he paced or smoked, but often he'd just stand there, doing nothing, just watching. I'd pull into my driveway around 9 or 10 at night, and there he'd be, leaning on the railing or at the edge of his driveway, facing the road. He never waved, never smiled. Even when I made eye contact, he would just stare. I tried to brush it off. I mentioned it to a few people, my mom, some friends, and they all said he was probably just a night person. But something about him didn't sit right. It wasn't just his presence. It was his complete stillness. No shifting, no phone checking, no movement. He stood like a statue. I kept telling myself not to overthink it. But the unease grew stronger over time. Then, one night in mid-September, the sounds began. I'd just finished a long shift at the distribution center where I worked inventory. It was about 10:30 p.m. when I got home, grabbed some food, and went straight to bed. I fell asleep by midnight. At exactly 2:37 a.m., I woke up to a noise, metal scraping against wood. At first, I thought I had imagined it, but then I heard it again. A long creaking sound, like a gate being slowly pushed open. My bedroom was on the first floor, and it had a sliding glass door leading to a small backyard with vertical blinds. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. There was silence for a moment. Then, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. My backyard was covered in decorative stone, so every step was distinct. These weren't animal noises. I grabbed my phone and crept out of bed. The only thing I had for protection was a dull kitchen knife in my nightstand. It felt silly, but it was something. I crouched near the window and peeked through the blinds. I saw nothing. The motion light hadn't turned on. Either they were outside its range, or they'd come in another way. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm and asked for my location. Officers were sent. I stayed low in the dark, barely breathing. About 10 minutes later, I saw red and blue lights flash through the front window. I stepped outside and spoke with 2 officers. I explained everything: the time, the sounds, what I suspected. One officer walked around the back while the other stayed with me. When he returned, he said the gate was shut and there were no signs of damage. He filed a report, but didn't find evidence of a break-in. One of them even suggested it might have just been a raccoon and gave me a look that made me feel like I was wasting their time. I didn't argue. They left soon after. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked the yard myself. That's when I found a flat rock, about the size of a paperback, wedged under the bottom of the gate. I'd never noticed it before. The gate usually swung closed due to a heavy spring, but this rock had been placed to keep it slightly open. It was subtle, something someone might use to slip back in silently. I threw it across the yard and called the police again. They added it to the report, but said there wasn't much else they could do. I asked if they could question neighbors or check for cameras. They said unless a crime had occurred, their hands were tied. 2 nights later, it escalated. At 2:14 a.m., I awoke to the sound of the back door handle rattling. At first, it was light, like someone testing it, then harder, like they were trying to force it open. I sat up, panicked. I couldn't see through the blinds, but I could sense someone right outside. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called 911. I hid in the hallway, out of sight. My motion light clicked on. Through a sliver in the blinds, I saw a shadow shift across the glass. A man. He didn't run, didn't hide. He just stood there. The same 2 officers arrived. This time they found footprints in the gravel, large ones leading straight to the door. Still, because no break-in occurred, there wasn't enough to take action. They promised to patrol more often and reminded me to keep my doors locked. The next day, I bought a security camera, mid-tier Wi-Fi model. I installed one above the back door and another on the front porch. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the feed on my phone. 2:14 passed. Nothing. But at 2:23, the back camera activated. A man stepped into view. He moved through the gate with precision, clearly avoiding the sensor until the last moment. He was tall, broad, wearing a black hoodie, jeans, and gloves. He walked up to the door, stared directly into the camera, and smiled. A slow, deliberate grin. Then he stepped back into the shadows. I called the police. They returned, watched the footage, and agreed it was disturbing. But still, with no crime committed, they said there was nothing they could do. Not even enough to request footage from my neighbor's doorbell cam. That night I stayed at a hotel. When I returned the next day, I found 4 muddy handprints on the glass. Too high, too low. As if someone had crouched and just rested there, watching. I moved out within a week. Broke the lease, lost the deposit. Didn't care. The final straw? A note in the mailbox, handwritten on lined paper. Small, cramped letters. The cops leave, but I don't. I filed one last report. That officer actually looked disturbed, promised a wellness check. But it was too late. I never went back. About a month later, a Facebook message arrived. A woman named Kayla had moved into the unit. Her message, "Hi, sorry to bother you. I think you used to live here. Did you ever have a guy in a black hoodie hanging around the backyard? I keep hearing footsteps at night. Last night someone knocked on the glass door around 2 a.m. and just stood there." I didn't reply. I didn't want to know. I work for a company that maintains foreclosed properties. We're the ones who clean them out, lock them up, shut off the water for winter, and sometimes board them up if there's damage. It's not glamorous, but the pay is good. Usually, the job is uneventful. Most of the time, you're alone in empty homes left behind by people who've long moved on. Some are depressing, others dull, but occasionally you get one that just feels wrong. This happened in 2020. I was sent to clear out a house deep in rural upstate New York. Town was fading. Only one gas station, boarded up storefronts, cracked roads taken over by weeds. The house itself was a small single-story place, set off a dirt road and surrounded on 3 sides by thick woods. No neighbors, just trees and quiet. The file said the elderly owner had passed and no family had claimed the place. The utilities had been cut for more than a year. My job was to list the contents, empty the house, and winterize it. I got there around 9 a.m. on a Monday in my box truck, loaded with tools. From outside, the house looked untouched. Windows shut, door locked, roof intact, but the porch was swallowed in vines and weeds. I had to force the front door open. It had swollen in the frame. Inside, it was what I expected. Stale air, faded furniture, dust. Then my work phone rang. It scared me. I'd already seen I had no signal out there, no bars. But the phone still buzzed. No number on screen, just unknown caller. I picked up. Nothing. Just faint static. I said hello a couple times, then hung up. Figured it was a glitch. I got started taking photos of everything for documentation. The living room was filled with heavy furniture, old curtains, framed paintings. It reminded me of my grandma's place. Doilies, porcelain dolls, antique cabinets. The hallway smelled, not rotting, more like mold, dust, and a hint of something metallic. There were 3 bedrooms. One was nearly empty, just a saggy mattress on the floor. Another was a sewing room with thread spools and a dusty machine. I noticed a corkboard pinned with old newspaper obituaries. Neatly cut, dozens of them, all local. Names I didn't know. The master bedroom had an old rotary phone on the nightstand, the off-white kind with a coiled cord yellowed from time. I paused, remembering phones like that, knowing it was long dead. No dial tone, no line. I moved on to the bathroom. Then the phone rang again. My cell. Same unknown caller. I hesitated but answered. Again, silence. Until I heard it. A whisper. So faint, I barely caught it. Don't answer the phone in the bedroom. Then the call ended. I froze. Everything was quiet. I checked the windows, all locked. No sign of anyone. Maybe a prank, but no one knew I was there yet. I checked my phone. 1 bar, then none. Like the signal appeared and vanished. I tried calling my supervisor. Failed. I decided to work faster. I started packing things in the living room. Figurines, books, glassware. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I kept glancing toward the hallway. Then I heard the rotary phone ring. Not my phone. That phone. The one in the bedroom. It rang loud and sharp, mechanical. I stopped. That line was dead. There was no way it could work. Yet it rang again. I walked down the hall, phone still in hand. The ringing continued. I stepped into the bedroom. The phone was shaking on the nightstand, the receiver trembling. I didn't dare pick it up. Eventually, it stopped. I backed out of the room. I wanted to leave, but I had to check the basement. I almost left anyway. But something in me kept going. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness. The basement door was in the kitchen. I opened it slowly. Each step groaned as I went down, flashlight in hand. The air smelled of mold and rust. Shelves lined the wall. Old paint cans, junk. In the far corner was a table. On it, a dusty cordless phone and a stack of yellow notebooks. I picked one up. Each page listed a name, date, and note. Lena H., July 3, 2019. Rang once, no answer. Carl M., September. 12/2019. Picked up, warned him. Page after page, dozens. My heart dropped. I looked around, panicked, sure someone was hiding in the shadows. I rushed up the stairs, not looking back until I was outside. I didn't finish the job. Back at the office, I filed my report. Said the site was unsafe. Possible squatters. I left out the details. They reassigned the job. 2 days later, a coworker texted me, Mark. He went out there to finish up. I hadn't told him anything. His message. That phone in the bedroom rang while I was there. No service. Wabiev? I called him right away. He said he didn't answer it. Too freaked out. The next day, he quit. No explanation. I checked on him later. He's alive, active on Facebook. But I never spoke to him again. After that, our boss called the police to check the house. They found no one. Everything about that place felt wrong. The location, the silence, the calls, the voices, the phones that shouldn't ring. It was like being in a real-life horror film. I still don't know what happened. Maybe it was some elaborate prank, or maybe something far worse. This happened back in 2019. I was in my late 20s, living by myself in a rented house located on the outskirts of a quiet town. It wasn't anything fancy, just an older single-story home with squeaky floors, thin walls, and a tiny backyard. But the rent was low, and it had a basement, which I mainly used for storing extra furniture, tools, and random items. I moved in during the spring. For the first few months, everything felt normal. The house had its quirks: noisy plumbing when the shower was running, and a kitchen cabinet that would slowly swing open on its own. But nothing that felt off for an old place. The only part I never really liked was the basement. Its door was located in the hallway, right next to the bathroom. It was heavy and stuck when you opened it, and the light switch wasn't at the top of the stairs. It was halfway down. So, to turn on the light, you had to step a few stairs into complete darkness first. The first time I went down there, something felt off. I wouldn't call it fear exactly, just an odd uneasiness. The single bulb didn't really light the corners, and the whole room had this old, dusty wood smell. But I didn't need to be down there often. I stored my things, closed the door, and forgot about it, at least until late October. One night after my shift, I worked security overnight, so I usually got home around 3 a.m. I was heading to the bathroom when I heard something, a soft knock, 3 quiet taps. They came from behind the basement door. I froze. At first, I thought it was in my head. Maybe it was just the house, or the pipes. But then, I heard it again. 3 knocks, clear and slow. I stepped back and stared at the door. Silence followed. I whispered to myself, "It's just the house," though I didn't really believe it. I didn't open the door. I went to my room, locked it, and stayed up for hours, listening. Eventually, I dozed off with the TV on. The next morning, I opened the basement door, went down the stairs, and turned on the light. Everything was untouched. Nothing was moved. No footprints in the dust. No broken windows. I convinced myself it was just the old house creaking, or maybe a squirrel or something. But a few nights later, it happened again. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. This time, it was a single knock, but louder, more aggressive, like someone hit the basement door with their knuckles. I opened the bathroom door and looked. The hallway was still. The door was shut. Nothing moved. I walked over and pressed my ear against the wood. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, I swear I heard breathing, quiet and rhythmic, as though someone was standing directly on the other side, waiting. I backed away and locked myself in my room again. I called my landlord and told him something weird was happening with the basement. I thought maybe someone got in. He sounded doubtful, but said he'd come by to check. He showed up the next morning. We went down together. He examined everything, windows, walls, even the foundation. There were no signs of damage or entry. Nothing was broken, no tracks. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't explain what I'd heard. I didn't want to sound crazy. For the next several days, things were calm. I started thinking I'd imagined it. Maybe I was sleep deprived. But then, one night around 2 a.m., I was watching TV when I heard the basement door creak open. Not bang, creak. The hinges slowly grinding. I turned the volume down and listened. It was still going. I walked to the hallway and saw the door, wide open. I hadn't touched it in over a week. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward it. I didn't have a weapon, but I had to see. I stood at the top of the stairs and pointed the light down. It was pitch black. The bulb didn't come on. I reached around to flip the switch. Nothing. Burned out. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps climbing up toward me. My body froze. I slammed the door shut and gripped the handle tight. I could feel pressure on the other side. Something was pressing against it. Then silence. I locked the door and called the police. I told them someone was in the basement. They came fast. 2 officers went through the house and down the stairs. I waited outside. Eventually, they came back up. They said they didn't find anything. No forced entry, no intruder. Nothing was even moved. One of them joked I'd probably watched too many horror movies. But I knew what I heard. After they left, I stood outside for a long time before going back in. I locked everything, doors, windows, and stayed up till daylight. The next morning, I bought a padlock and installed it on the basement door. That whole month, nothing happened. No sounds, no movement. I started to relax. Then one night, I got home and saw the basement door cracked open. Not just unlocked. The padlock was broken and lying on the floor. The door was ajar. I hadn't touched it. I just stood there staring. And that's when it hit me. Every time this happened, the knocks, the sounds, it was always late at night. Always when I was completely alone. I didn't go down. I couldn't. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend. When I came back, I nailed the basement door shut and pushed a chair against it. I didn't care what my landlord thought. I just couldn't look at that door anymore. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., I was lying in bed when I heard something I can't explain. A voice, not loud, not even full words, just the subtle vibration of someone's vocal cords. It came from under my bed, from the basement below. That was the last straw. I called the cops again. They searched, again. Nothing. So I packed up, left everything, even my stuff in the basement, and moved out. I didn't care about the lease. I still don't know what was down there. I don't want to know. But some nights in my new place I lie awake and wonder, what would have happened if I waited a little longer at the top of those stairs?